Welcome to this tutorial on an introduction to arrays in Java. So what is an array? By definition, an array is a data structure consisting of a collection of elements, also known as values or variables, each identified by at least one array index or key. So what does that mean? Let's review what we know about variables. Variables are a section of memory that has been dedicated to a specific value in our code. To put it another way, it's like a container that holds a value for us. This value has a type, in this case integer. It has a name, in this case var a, and it has a value, in this case 4. But what if we want more? How about if we want 5 values? Well, we would need to do the whole process again. Create a section in memory we want to use, specify its type, give it a name, and give it a value. And then continue to repeat these steps 3 more times. Now that we have 5 values, what if we wanted 100, or 1,000, or 1,000,000? The whole process would become tedious and we would run out of variable names. This is where arrays come in. An array allows us to take all these values and group them together into a single reference. In fact, we can think of it as taking our 5 containers and putting them into one larger container. This is what we call an array, or in this case, an integer array since its values are integers. Just like a variable, it has a name, and when we want to refer to its values, we are going to use something called an index. The first value in the array is at index 0, the second value is at index 1, and the following values are at 2, 3, and 4. When we want to refer to our values, though, we're going to use something called a key. The key is the combination of the variable name for the array and its index value. The first value's key would be r with square brackets and a 0. The second value's key would be r with square brackets and a 1. And of course, the ones following would be r2, 3, and 4, all with square brackets around their index value. Now let's look at arrays in our code. Okay, first let's take a look at declaring an array. There are 2 ways to do this. One is to declare it as whatever type it is, followed by its variable name and 2 square brackets. Or you can put the square brackets before the variable name. Either of these will declare an array. Next, we'll want to initialize an array. In order to initialize an array, we have a couple different methods. Option 1 is that we can do the same thing we did before with the declaration statement and make it equal to a new int, and inside the square brackets, we are putting how large the array is. If we put 40, for instance, this means it can store 40 integers. If we want to put a value into a specific index, we can use the key that we have been looking at before and give it a value. If I continue this for other indexes, this will give them values as well. Java has default values that it will give to arrays. For integers, for instance, it will be 0. Option 2 is to create the array with values already in it. This means that instead of putting a number inside our square brackets, we will put braces next to it, and inside we will put the values we want to store in the array. This also means that the array will have a size equal to the number of elements that we provide. In this case, 3. Option 3 is to not use the new int portion and to instead just put the values inside of the braces. This is also acceptable. If we want to look at the length of the array, previously for anything such as a string, we would use .length with 2 brackets next to it. For an array, we are instead going to use length but no brackets. This is because length is not a method, but is actually just a variable that already has the length stored in it. If we want to initialize our arrays using a loop, we can declare an array of a specific size like we did before, and we can create a loop that will go through one by one and give each index a value. In this case, each index will get a value of one more than the index number. This should mean that our array D will have the values 1 to 1000. If we want to output using a loop, I will create the same loop. Notice that my loop will always start at 0. The condition will always be that the value I'm using is less than the length of the array, and that we will increment through it one by one. If I want to print this, I'm going to use system.out.println, and I'm going to put the index value inside of the square brackets for the array that I created. This will go through and do the indexes from 0 to 999, one by one. If I want to do something, such as print out the last index, I cannot do what you would do in other languages, such as Python. In Python, you can use -1 to get the last index. In Java, this gives you an out-of-bounds error. Any value that is greater than or equal to the length of the array, or is a negative number, will give you an array index out-of-bound exception. This will crash your program. That concludes this tutorial on an introduction to Java arrays.